What do I do if I don't know the answer? We discussed that. Worried about working with faculty. So as a Spanish tutor, every day there's a new faculty member there that is with you and helping you. The best thing to do that I've done is make friends with them, talk to them, be nice. They're not going to bite you. They're great. They appreciate that you're there to help them, because if you're not there, they have to help all those students by themselves. And in the Spanishes, you could have someone in Spanish 1 and then someone in Spanish 3 come in, and those are two completely different topics. And so I've always found it best to be friendly with faculty, and then, I mean, even when they see you around campus, they're like, hey, how are you? Like your old friends. As far as that, I've only worked with Spanish faculty.
Yeah, so in my math sessions, I actually have not worked with faculty, but for one semester, I was paired with a gateway class that all the freshmen were in remedial math in that class. So I worked with them once a week to tutor that class specifically, and therefore I did have to work with faculty. One of the best things I would say is faculty usually will love your help. Any question that you answer means that they don't have to answer. That frees up their time to either help other students or do any of their other faculty responsibilities. The faculty that I work with, I was talking about like old friends, they really see you more on like they don't see you on the student level as much, they see you as more of a peer with them. So like my faculty actually let me call him by his first name. That's a little bit different than having to call him doctor. And then after I got done being his tutor for that class, we actually still keep in contact, and he's offered to write me like letters of recommendation and all sorts of stuff. So working with these faculty, don't just think of it as something you have to do, but really think of it as like an opportunity to get to know somebody on campus. You can be like really integral either as a mentor to you on campus, or even just like somebody to write you a recommendation letter, or somebody to give you advice about future education, anything like that, because building these relationships and network on campus is something you're going to have to do in your profession as you grow up and move on out of college. So it's good to kind of hone those skills while you're here.
Okay, and the last one, how do I deal with students who don't want, well, that was
Okay.
How do I deal with students that who don't want to apply themselves and only want the answer? That is a big fear for a lot of PLAs in the sciences, in math,
Foreign
in
language
Spanish.
as well.
Yes, people come in for Connect homework,
Yeah.
and you have to tell them like, hey, we don't do that. And so this is where the Socratic question comes in. Because a lot of people that come in for that, they'll come in and they'll be like, I just don't understand this. And you're like, well, what do you remember last? Like, I don't know. So you might have to go back to like the basics of things and build up off of that and be like, well, do you remember when they talked about this? How do you think that applies to this topic? We don't, if you're in a foreign language, it's not, you can't help with Connect, because that is a graded assignment, and that is an integrity violation, academic misconduct. And essays, you can look over those, just don't reword it. I don't know, I mean, I know you work in Farsi, I don't know if anyone else is language. I think there's French. You just have to reword it, and like, you can't change it for them. You can tell them what you think is wrong, like tenses and things like that, and give them ideas that they can build on later. And then, anything else you can think of?
Yeah, so this happens a lot in math. Either people will be like, how do I do this problem? / what is the right answer? Or is this answer right? Is this answer right? Is this answer right? Well, I'm not a grade checker, so I don't really care if the answer is right, honestly. I'm more worried about the process and the steps you took to get the answer. So my first question is, what was your first step? When you say, is this answer right? What was your first step? That's my go-to answer. It works almost every time. It makes them try to think about the process. And now in math, it's a little bit easier to kind of, some people think Socratic questioning in math is a little difficult. I found it to be quite intuitive after you do it for a while. You just kind of ask them about different steps. A lot of times, if you're doing a new subject, pre-calc has very little to do with college algebra sometimes. People don't see that connection a lot. So if you come in and they're like, I don't have any idea what's going on, I need you to redo the whole lesson, I just want the answer actually, because I just have this assignment that's due tomorrow or tonight at midnight, I have to get it done on Dropbox. So I think the one way I do this is I say, unfortunately I can't just give you the answer, and I'm not just going to grade your homework, I'm not just going to check your answer, but I can help you walk through the steps and see if your thinking is right. I think it is an academic violation to say, yes, this answer is right, or no, it is not right. I think that might be a violation, and it's not helpful either way, whether it is or not. So usually people say, is this answer right? I go, is that the first step? And I'll say, yeah, it looks like all your steps are logical, and then I move on. So it's kind of a different kind of wording, and it takes them away from being like, oh, you're just here to check my homework. That's all. The only reason I come to tutoring is just to make sure I'm going to get 100 on assignment, because that's not our jobs. And we don't want that to be our jobs. We want to actually help people understand material. So if they can do the problem and they just want you to grade it, I wouldn't be okay with that.
So,
Yes.
So you're basically saying if we identify that the answer is wrong, we don't have to tell them that the answer is wrong.
If they come up to you and they say, is this answer right, and you can clearly see it is wrong, I would say, what was your first step? Okay, I see that you wrote down the problem. What did you do after that? You moved this over to the other side. Now, let's say that's where they made the mistake and that's where the answer is wrong. Okay, so if we have a positive 10 on this side, what happens when we move to the other side? Oh, it becomes negative. That's where I made my mistake. So I would definitely lead them in the direction of showing them that their answer is wrong. I wouldn't tell them directly, yeah, this answer is incorrect. I would help lead them through the steps and then kind of focus on the step that they got incorrect, that they can identify their own problems. And the point of that is so that whenever they're not at tutoring, if they're on a test or if they're doing homework by themselves, they can re-look at their own work and hopefully they'll be able to identify those mistakes themselves and not have to have a tutor walk them through the process. Once again, we're trying to get them to become independent learners. So by just saying, yeah, 3 is not the answer, you made a mistake, bummer. Instead of saying that, because that's not very helpful, actually walking them through it and kind of focusing on that 1 or 2 step they got incorrect, and that way they can see their own mistake. So if somebody has the answer wrong, I wouldn't just be like, move on. You want to help them make sure that they do get the answer correct at the end, but you want to do that through the step process and not just by telling them. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? Comments? We've been talking a lot. I want to hear some input. Yeah?
Also pay attention to the smile on their face when they figure the answer in the wrong step by themselves. So, oh yeah, this one. And it's very rewarding that they have to figure things out. I was requesting for a scenario. Let's say x minus 5 equals 2. I don't know it, right? And you're trying to show me through. How would you do it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if so the question is he wants like a step-by-step review on how I would help somebody. So if this was the process, if it was like x minus 5 equals 2. And I tutored remedial math here at OU, and that was one of my favorite subjects was tutor. So a lot of times this is legitimately the problem that I'm addressing. So my first step would be like, okay, so what's our goal? What are we trying to do here? Well, we're trying to figure out what x equals. Great. So what should our last step look like? Well, it should say x equals. Okay, great. So our last step is going to be x equals. So that's what we want. So if we're trying to go from here to here, what do we need to get rid of? Well, we need to get rid of that 5. Okay, good. So when we bring a 5, if we're trying to get rid of this 5, how do we do that? How do we kind of move it across the equal sign? Well, I know that you like either add or subtract 5, but I can't remember. Okay, well, we want to do the opposite. So what is this sign? Well, it's a subtraction sign. So what's the opposite of subtraction? Addition. Great. So we're going to add 5 then. So then, now what do we do? Well, this just kind of cancels out, and we're left with like an x equals, and then 5 plus 2. Okay, 7. Oh, great. That looks like the answer we were trying to get. So that's how I got my answer. So that's exactly how I would lead somebody through it. Going through each step and not giving them too much information, trying to help them realize their own information. Any other questions?
I just wanted a clarification, maybe you can help me out with this. But whenever they do come in and they either have they come to write an essay, for example, right? And you help them through that. That's not academic misconduct, but if they come in with an essay that's already written, you can't correct it? Is that
No, you can correct it. You just can't add extra. You can't say like this type of sentence. Like if you added a sentence that made it flow much more easier, or certain things, you can't put it in your own words. To be like, you can be like, well, you can include something like this and speak about it in English, but they have to be the one to put it in their own words. So if you're adding words that make it make sense, like you can change the things that they have, or tell them what it is that they are doing wrong. Like if they, in Spanish, singular and plural, you can underline the word and be like, okay, look at this adjective. Is this need to be singular or plural? And then you ask them, why did you pick this? And then you tell them, well, what is it describing? And it would be the plural word. So they need to change it to plural. So you just can't add sentences or tell them like, this doesn't make sense, you should write it like this. It needs to stay in their own words, but you can help them fix their grammatical errors and things like that.
Okay, so we have about, what, 7 minutes, 6 minutes left. We had a case study we can definitely do, no problem at all. It's a really good case study. I love it. It's my favorite case study ever. But if you have more questions, we can just continue with the Q&A if you'd rather. If there's anything that you thought of while we were talking or anything specific to your subject you're worried about that you would like to discuss or ask advice from either one of the other students in this class or in this group or from me or Justin, we can do that as well. But if nobody has any more questions, we're going to do the case study. So, does anybody have any more questions? Any comments, suggestions? Awesome, case study in our last 5 minutes.
Okay, so break up into twos? Or someone needs to miss two? Okay, yeah, break up into groups of twos and figure out who wants to be the
Group of
tutor
two, so
and
easy,
who wants to be a
isn't it?
student. And then we're going to give you the case study.
Cool. Find a partner. No groups of 3, if you can help it.
Yeah, there's enough for everyone to have a partner.
You know, I want to say I really like I like
Okay. Everyone got their partner?
Does everybody know who a student is, who the tutor is? Any partners? Cool.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to read you the case study. So,
Okay, so for the tutor, this is what you need to think about. You're the tutor, the student is a hard worker, but just isn't getting it. She or he asks for your old lecture notes. Hers or his, as you can see, are an absolute disaster. No wonder she can't study, she or he can't study from them. So for the student.
everybody got that for the tutor?
Yeah.
All right, so for the student, you are frustrated because you have been working really hard and you just aren't learning the material. You take notes in class constantly, but when you review them, usually once the night before the test, they don't make much sense and don't help you remember the important parts of the lecture. Out of desperation, you ask to borrow the tutor's old class notes. So that's something that could definitely possibly happen in one of your sessions. So kind of discuss it with the dynamic you've created in your pairs. So act like you're the student, act like you're the tutor, and see how you would handle that.
I can't read my notes.
Amy,
Where'd you put the sign?
this is where the rest of the teaching will talk.
And probably my teaching. Do you want more?